You can't do this work if you don't have a healthy ego. You will crack. You won't make it.
Mm-mm.
This is hard work.
Yep.
Eventually, this work involves looking at your shadow in more depth, looking at the things you're ashamed of, the things you don't want to see about yourself that you buried a long time ago. And what we got to look at that. Yes, the part of you that thinks you want to go on this journey initially doesn't know that he doesn't get to finish it or she doesn't get to finish it.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Crack Between the Worlds with Mark Wald. And this is part 2 of our discussion on the illusion of self and what is self, the question of self. And I'm in conversation with my partner in time today, Garon Niemyer.
Hello again.
Hello again.
Mm.
So we were having a little pre-entry conversation, and we were chatting a little bit about the concept of maps and models. And even though I covered this in my intro episode a little bit, I think it's important, and you brought it up, that we really understand, and maybe actually I like what you said. Could you just share with everybody the question you ask your clients?
Yeah, often at some point pretty early on, I'll ask them how they make sense of the world. And it's a very kind of open question. Usually that's the first response I get is, what do you mean? Like clarification. Really won't go anywhere with it. I'll try to push it back, because what you're growing towards is the fact that we make sense of the world through some type of model and map. And mostly until we question that, it's completely unconscious.
Right.
Even if we say we have no model and map, we do have a model and map, right? It seems to be the only way we know how to apprehend this thing we call reality. And so I think the value of upgrading your maps and having sharper, more precise models that match your experience, and not taking them because you read it and you liked it, but actually applying it and trying to move through the world with it a bit, playing with it, right? I mean, you've had a very experiential, I know, education in your life, and it's like that's kind of the way it has to be experienced for you to be able to utilize it and then offer it to others.
Right. And this is one of the reasons why I'm doing this podcast, because I've discovered these maps and models that seem to work. I'm not saying that they're right. I'm not saying that they're even real.
Right.
You know, we call them maps and models because they give an idea of the territory. They give a way to navigate it. The map is not reality.
Right.
So the model is not reality.
Yeah.
It's just some models are way more useful than others.
And if nothing else, just being conscious of what is your model is seemingly imperative to me, right? Just the bit that can do. Even if you don't want to change it, at least you're aware of how you're deciding to make sense of this.
Yes, because if you're not aware that you're using a model, then it is unconscious. Right. And it's ruling you. It's giving you limitations and everything.
Yes.
So I think that's really important. Any more you want to say about that?
No, I think that.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing I love your perspective on that.
Yeah. And it's adjacent to what we've been talking about with the self, right? Like the self is a model. Like we have a model of ourself. And that's why that question comes in for me to clients, is like, it's basically just the first way to start pointing someone back when they've been kind of, wide-eyed looking at the world as though that's their orientation solely, versus like, well, you're making this orientation. Like, how are you in dialogue with the environment, creating this relationship that is yourself?
We could spend a half hour just talking about that.
Oh, I know.
It's just remarkable, because most people, even as they're hearing this, I think a lot of people aren't going to really get that their experience of the world and how they see it is based on a model and a map, because we have no idea what reality really is.
Yeah.
We have no idea what the self really is. We have no idea how this exists in duality, why we're solid, because we're not made up of anything solid. We don't know very much.
No.
And yet we act as if we know it all. And it's all a model and a map. And that model and that map determine for you your limitations, how you're going to move through the world, your story, I'm not good enough, or I need to be better, or I need to be this good, or whatever. It's all part of a model and a map that you use unconsciously that is usually not very constructive.
Right. Until examined, exactly. So it's like, if nothing else, examine it so you know where you're standing, and then most likely you'll want to upgrade it. And the important part of that, as we've said, is the experiential feature, because there is this, I think, also problem in my generation today too, of people just adopting maps without really trying them on well.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, yeah, my map now I know does suck. I'm going to adopt this one. I'll just believe that. But you're really still just putting a new box around yourself versus actually trying to play with it, right? As many traditions, the Toltec tradition you've introduced me to. I mean, one of the amazing things about them was just their relentless pursuit of trying to utilize systems just to get out of the system.
Right.
It's just a way, like, yeah, they know it's a trap. The idea is just to get inside of as much as you can and claw and scrape and try it on and break out of it to the next thing, but never holding on to it too.
That's a great description.
Completely.
I love the Toltec tradition for that reason. That was a great description. So we were talking about self and the illusion of self and the fact that it's a model.
Mm-hmm.
And that we have this ego and this strategy based on this story, and it's not real, but it's something we live by. And then when we look at that and question it, we're questioning the ego. Okay. So then you look at it and you go, wait a minute, is that me? And then you have to say, so who's asking the question?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to say anything about that?
Kind of want you to keep going.
Want me to keep going?
But it's the question, I would say, that has, rang a gong throughout primordial time.
Right.
Right. Is that, who am I? Right. And just that simple question, if we really sit with it, is incredibly powerful.
Yes.
So I appreciate that you're going there and that turning the thing back around.
Right. So what I like, so I want to step into this a little more in more depth, looking at the nature of reality, because on some level, whether we want to think about it or not, we live in a dualistic world. We live in duality. And what I mean when I say that is we live in a world where there are opposites, and the opposites cannot exist without each other. And they serve a purpose, because without duality, we would not have experience. Without duality, we would not have real awareness. We need something else to experience. We need something else to be aware of. And so duality serves an amazing purpose. The ego requires duality. The ego needs to be able to say, I'm this, I'm not that. The ego is not real. It is not a real thing. It is totally a construct, and it exists because duality exists, because we can have experience, because we can have awareness. The ego is playing in that realm, but it needs duality.
Yeah, we've talked about this offline too, is just the challenge of these waters, the language, the words, the definitions. I mean, if you look up ego, you'll get 1,000 different definitions of it, right? So I say that because I might use a word slightly different, just because the way we were using ego, thinking of it more as this manager construct, it has more of a texture we've embodied. If we were to open that up even further and say, not even just the ego, but the sense of a separate self, that idea, just this idea that I'm a separate self having an experience. And like you said, by definition, to have an experience of anything has to be a dualistic thing, because you have to have a subject and an object to experience something, right?
Right.
And so that's mainly the construct that seems to flourish in our society, is that I'm a separate self having a separate experience from you over there. And we already started to kind of play with the alchemy of that last time we talked. In thinking about the dream world, and if this is kind of, if we start to use that model, it's like, well, then you're not separate from me, right?
Right.
There starts to be a unification of everything. And I think that has profound impact on how we move through the world, right? You have to go, for me, I should speak for myself, I have to experience the essence of something that is non-dual for me to then shift this map that feels like I'm separate, right? Because it overlays very well. You feel like someone's separate sitting over there.
Mm-hmm.
In this moment, it doesn't feel very much like you're me. I mean, I can
Mm-hmm.
feel much more a boundary than I can a unification. So to start to dissolve that, I feel like the thing I'm calling out is it has to be highly experiential. And so us just talking about it here, I want to name, is not, necessarily going to lead to a light bulb for someone that may feel something different, but hopefully it opens a door of curiosity of there are different ways to view this versus this is something that comes from a very Western viewpoint, a very, Enlightenment era of seeing the mind-body duality and seeing us as a separate self. And I could go, I could go a lot of ways with that, but I think at just the most fundamental level, if you think of the implications of if I were to see everything as separate from myself, what type of energy does that draw me into? Probably protectionism, pushing away, fear, not a very unified way. But if I see this all as me, then all of a sudden it becomes a much more loving environment to me. Love becomes more in there. There becomes more of a, the world. If we're not separate from it, why would we be destroying the world around us if it is us? It starts to change that, I guess.
Yeah, this is a really interesting perspective when you think about yet destructive nature as a part of consciousness, and it is a part of duality.
Right.
So it's
well, again, I mean, you get into the participatory then, right? I mean, again, you could go another whole episode talking about free will and where does that come in, right?
Right.
What is that? And we've, played in those waters before, but so if we just assume that we have the ability to replace models though, and models have an impact, I think I'd rather be on the side of dreaming this with love and passion and taking care of versus feeling the destruction that I can do, and that knowing it, claiming it, owning that it's part of me, but not trying to further it, doing my best to be a part of the awareness that wakes up like that. How do you see it?
Well, but you were speaking of it in terms of non-dual nature.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak more about that?
Yeah. I mean, that gets...
It's a subject we both love, but I would love for you to bring, because you were bringing it up, but I'd love for you to just kind of fill it in a little bit and we can talk about it.
Sure. I mean, I guess for me, again, it's got to be highly experiential. And a lot of the ways that I started to find threads that were resonant for me were through the Vedantic tradition, which is, you've already kind of we've named their ultimate question, which is, who am I? And starting to turn that back in and realizing that there's nothing there, as we talked about before. But one of the things that comes from that experience is the continuance of awareness, that there is no break in the awareness of my experience. That's thoughts come and go, feelings come and go, all these thinking and perceiving. What's arising in my awareness changes constantly. But the awareness of my awareness, that observer, that self, that thing, big S self, that is not affected by any of it, right? No thought has ever diminished my sense of self at that level. No feeling has ever taken from me at that level. Otherwise, I would be probably not much left at this point if every thought took something from from that sense, that place. So there's something of continuity there. And I think that's the place of exploration, I guess, that I go to when I say a non-dual experience, right? Which is, I fully want to recognize it's not possible by definition to have a non-dual experience. As an oxymoron.
Thank you for saying that.
Yes.
I love that that's really important to me too.
Right. But it's the feel of something that is more closely aligned to this. Oh, actually my deepest experience though has this continuity to it, and there's really not a lot of boundary to it. I can't find a boundary. It's just this open awareness, this deep meditation where you feel the vast expanse of it, right? Which, and maybe something to call in as we talk about it, I think the traditions that do it best, that's why they won't even talk about it in the positive, right? They'll talk about it via negativa. They'll only say it's not this, it's not that, because to say it is anything is limiting it.
Right. And this is something, and I want to dive into this just for a moment. And it's where the name of this podcast comes from, the crack between the worlds. And I'm going to just say that for me, and this is also in Buddhist, they call it the middle path or the middle way, the center path, something like this. There's Buddhist and Taoist traditions talk about this place of being in the center or the middle, right? And so for me, this is the experience of, instead of standing in the center, and again, it's not non-dual, because you can't have that experience.
Right.
Experience requires duality,
Mm.
but it is standing in the center of duality, like in the center of the opposites.
Opposites, polarities.
Right. And so I'm not going to be pulled into this is good or bad or right or wrong, or this is good or it's good, it's bad. It's more about being in the place of realizing that in duality, all of those things have to exist. Good and bad have to exist. The opposites have to be. You can't have good without bad. And so when I stand in the center of that, there's a place to exist where it's like a non-dual experience. It's an experience that reminds us of what non-duality might be like.
Sure.
I don't know how, maybe you have a better way of describing it.
I don't.
But what happens is I'm not being pulled one direction or the other, and everything just is. And that's a really magical experience. And there are meditations that I want to talk about. There are ways to get there. But the key here is when I'm in that experience, or the way to get there is through experiencing that self you're talking about. And that when we get there, when we're in that state and we're not getting pulled one way or the other, the ego can't really be there.
Yeah, it collapses, I would say.
Right. That's a good way to describe it. It dissolves. It can't show up there. And so it doesn't want us to go there. This is why meditation is so damned hard, because the ego is up there going, wait a minute, I want to do this. Wait a minute, I want to, how do I, wait, well, let's think about something else. We don't want to, it doesn't want you to go there because it knows it can't survive there.
Yes.
And so this is the place where I have, for the first time in a meditation practice, there's a variety of practices that I've used that have taken me there, where everything stops, everything goes silent, and the ego is not there.
Yeah.
And I realize from there I can see the stories are not true, that the strategies aren't really what I want to do. I just spoke a lot. Do you want to bring anything in about this? Or?
No, I just appreciate, again, the way, we, in some of these areas, we diverge in the language and the models, but they're pointing at the same thing. Again, what I'm talking about, the awareness of awareness, that's kind of the crack between the worlds to me.
Yes.
It's the place where the ego dissolves.
That's one of the meditation practices you can use to get there. Right. Is awareness of awareness.
Exactly.
That's right.
Yep. You can get in it and you have that experience, it breaks down. And so you start to realize, oh, there's something here that I'm not, that needs more attention, right? It's different than this experience I tend to spend most of my waking life playing out. There's something there to be learned. And I mean, the deep unknowing of it alone is enough to drive curiosity, right? Maybe, I know we're not kind of totally going this direction, but I can't help but ask, because there's something about, for people listening, how do you avoid what can be considered a nihilistic view of standing in that place, right? If we're saying that you stand there and you right, wrong, good, bad, it's all happening, it's all here, there can be a twist where that feels like nihilism. And so I'm curious how you, or if that is what you foster. I don't think you're a nihilist, but how do you hold that in some way for people?
That's a really good question. And I agree with you. It's easy to fall into the trap of nihilism. And I wonder if that isn't part of the function of the ego stepping in and trying to be a part of the conversation.
Yeah.
Right. I think this is also coming back to me from the concept of the fabric of reality, the nature of reality. The nature of this reality is, first of all, part of the fabric is duality, but it all has to exist. It's not good or bad. It's not right or wrong. Bad things have to exist. Bad things happen. It's not like you said, I'm going to try to stay in the place where I'm being in the state of love. That's my journey. That's my goal. That's what you were saying,
Mhm.
right? So that's not nihilism.
Mhm.
You're not saying, I want to say is that this is a bad place or a negative place or I give up. What's the point? It's
Right.
more like, oh, I'm fully aware of the nature of consciousness here.
Yeah.
And and it is a gift to be able to witness it all in its glory.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be here.
Mhm.
This is experience. We can't have experience without good and bad.
Yeah.
So it's not a nihilistic perspective. It's the exact opposite. I feel more alive, more present, more here because of it.
Yeah.
It doesn't, and one of the things I want to say here is that when I do non-dual work, when I do meditation, when I find that place of awareness that we're talking about, it isn't to escape this,
Right.
which a lot of meditation practices are considered. Don't take this seriously. This isn't real. None of this is real. For me, it makes it more real.
Mhm.
It makes it more something I can taste and
Mhm.
touch. It becomes more interesting. And I'm realizing this is about evolving consciousness.
Mm.
And that is what I'm here for, to be in my aliveness and evolve it. And I don't want to let the good or the bad get in the way of it. It
Mm.
just is.
Mhm.
Am I answering the question? Does
Yeah.
that make sense? Is that
Yes.
helpful?
Yeah, because I
Yeah.
mean, I know that place, but I was curious how you would speak to it
Yeah.
because I think
Yeah.
that's the danger that people can find is that it feels a bit nihilistic, but it's actually quite tantric.
Right.
It's
That's a
the
good word for it. Thank
yeah,
you for saying that.
it's like emptying out so you can fill it up with
Yeah.
the serum, you know, and it's like I think that piece, it's a two-step. It's empty out to fill up, not to empty out and stay back, like you said, and just be like, well, this is all an illusion, so I'm just gonna park it and go home.
Mhm.
Like, no, now you get to engage with the world so fully.
Right.
You're
Exactly.
you can your oppositional stance is empty in a way now, right? It's not that you don't oppose. I oppose things that I don't think are right. I stand up to those
Right,
things.
right, right.
But there's a sense of emptiness to it. There's a deeper place that it pulls, right? I mean, this is why it's so tough to put language to because it is an experiential
It just makes the
nature.
playground more interesting to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's more to do here. Everything has meaning in its meaninglessness
Mhm.
in a way.
Mhm.
So I think this is probably a good place to come to a close for this part 2.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm hoping we can, in the very near future, get together to do a part 3 because this is really fascinating.
Yeah.
And one of the things I want to say as we're exiting here is something I remember saying to you a long time ago,
Mm.
but I want to say it to everyone, and that is that first of all, this isn't about enlightenment, right? This isn't about enlightenment. I don't think I even believe in enlightenment. I think
No.
the journey is the destination, and that as soon as I think I don't have a shadow, the shadow is going to run rampant, and I'm in
Yeah.
trouble.
You're already in it.
So, but that goal of waking up, that goal of coming into ourself, that
Mm.
the thing that drives us to come here initially is the ego.
Mhm.
And the
Mm.
ego doesn't know that it doesn't get to finish the journey, right?
Yeah.
And I just want to say that out loud that this is really important to understand the function of the ego. It serves a purpose. In fact, you can't do this work if you don't have a healthy ego. You will crack. You won't make it.
Mm-mm.
This is hard work.
Yep.
Eventually, this work involves looking at your shadow in more depth, looking at the things you're ashamed of, the things you don't want to see about yourself that you buried a long time ago. And what we got to look at that. Yes,
Mhm.
we do. We have to look at that. And I know you know that. I'm not speaking to you
Mm.
specifically, but I think it's important to just say that the part of you that thinks you want to go on this journey initially doesn't know that he doesn't get to finish it or
Mm.
she doesn't get to finish it.
Mhm.
Do you have anything else you want to add before we close today?
As you were saying that, the only thing that floated to mind was one of my favorite Ramana Maharshi quotes about that, which
Oh,
is
please share.
Yeah, which is essentially the mind or the ego is a great servant, but a terrible master. Right? It's the journey.
It's so good.
Mm.
I love it when it's just so simple
Mm-hmm.
like that too.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Thank you for coming in and hanging out with me today. I love our conversations. I want to say to everybody too that initially I've been thinking about doing this kind of thing for a long, long time, and I never got around to it. But there was a point where you and I, our work together had ended.
Mm.
We weren't really, you weren't, I wasn't going to, I had nothing to serve you with.
Mm.
You were on your journey already. You were just on your way. And yet we kept meeting just to have these conversations. And we started to record these conversations. And that was what I needed to decide to do this. So thank you so very much.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're an amazing being.
You as well.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you all for joining us today. And remember, be good to you. Thanks, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
The Crack Between the Worlds is conceived and hosted by Mark Wald, produced, engineered, and edited by Lloyd Lemmerman. Music composed by Kindly, a Turning on the Lights production. For updates, visit Crack Between the Worlds and our Instagram @The Crack Between the Worlds.